Hi, I'm Donna Jordan from Jordan Fabrics. Today we're going to be making a pattern from the Quilt Factory called Hugs and Kisses. Now it's called Hugs and Kisses because it's got two different blocks. We've got the hugs and the kisses. But we're only going to make one block. This is the block that makes up the whole quilt. And it's kind of half of each of the hugs and kisses blocks. And when we make the blocks and start laying them out, both the hugs and the kisses will show up in the quilt. Now, I've made a lot of quilts in my lifetime, probably several thousand, but when I looked at the cover of this, I did not know that it's all made with one block. It's made with this simple block here, which is called a half square triangle. So just by turning this different directions, we're going to get the whole quilt. Now, if you're a beginning quilter, or you've never made a quilt and you want to make your first quilt, I would highly recommend this because the process is simple, but the result is just stunning. So this is a Fab 5 pattern, and that means we need 5 fabrics, 1 yard each. So these are the ones I've selected here, and we are going to use 4 of them in the patchwork, and then 1 is going to be for the border. Now I'm going to use Christmas prints for my quilt because I'm trying to get my holiday sewing done early. But you can really use any color to make this quilt. The only thing you want to remember is you want to use 2 light prints and 2 dark prints so that your patchwork blocks will look good. Then for your border, it can be light or dark, it doesn't matter, just something that matches with the other prints. Now before I cut the fabric, I always iron it nice and flat. I have kind of a fancy heavy-duty Rowenta iron here, but any iron will work. You just want your fabric wrinkle-free, nice and flat, so that when you cut, everything will be very accurate. Now I can't give you all the cutting sizes because it's not my pattern, but I've made a lot of Deb Grogan's patterns before and her instructions are very clear and easy to follow. Now if this is your first quilt, you just need a few simple tools to get it cut out. You're going to need a rotary cutter, so this has got a really sharp blade on it there. It's kind of like a pizza cutter. You need some sort of straight edge. This is a clear plastic ruler. And then you need a cutting mat to put on your table so you don't cut into your table. Now this is a 24 by 36 inch one. They do come in different sizes, and all these tools are readily available at any craft store, or you can find them online. Now anytime we're cutting patchwork, we want it to be nice and straight, because then when we sew it together, it'll be much more accurate. So I like to use a counterbalance. I like to use a 5-pound weight here on the end of my ruler to help keep it from moving. Now, if you don't have a dumbbell, that's okay. Anything with a little weight, set it on your ruler, and that will keep anything from sliding. Everything is cut now, and the first step is to take the light prints, and we're going to draw a line on the back side from corner to corner along the diagonal here. So I'm going to use my plastic ruler again, and I'm going to use a pencil, and I'm just going to draw a light line all the way down there. So I'm going to do that on the back of all the light squares. There, once you've got lines drawn on the back of all of the lights, you're going to want to pair up one of your lights with one of the darks and the other light with the other dark, and you're going to want to keep them together. It doesn't really matter which light goes with which dark, but keep them all together. Now let's head over to the sewing machine. We're going to use the same method for all of the blocks here. We're going to take one dark block and one light block, and we're going to put them right sides together, match up all the edges, and now we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch away from that drawn line. Now my presser foot happens to be a 1/4 inch wide, so I can put the edge of my presser foot right on that line there and stitch down one side. And then I can simply turn it around and stitch down the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and do that with all of the blocks. The next step is to cut right along that drawn line. So I'm going to put my plastic ruler right along the line and cut. And now what we have is 2 blocks. Each one is a half square triangle. So we're going to take these to the ironing board. And I like to put the light fabric down on the board and then peel this open. And what's going to happen is my seam allowances now here, they're pointing towards the dark fabric, and that's good. You always want those seam allowances pointing towards the dark. And I use a dry iron and then a little steam. And then all we have to do is trim off these little extra bits here. These are called dog ears, and I'm just going to take some scissors and cut that little extra bit off. So I'm going to go ahead and do that same procedure with all of my blocks, and that's all we need to do. Once you have all those done, we're ready to lay out our block. So I've grabbed 8 of the green and 8 of the red, and I'm actually going to lay these out right at the sewing machine because that's the easiest way to keep them in order and not get them mixed up. So here's what we're going to do. We've got a red in the middle. That makes kind of a line there. So that's 1/4. Then we're going to make a mirror image of that in this far corner here. And you can follow the pattern. It will show you how to lay these out, but it's pretty easy. Now the green squares, kind of the opposite. We're going to get a green line going here. And then again, a mirror image of that over here. Now to stitch these together, I'm going to take them in pairs and I'm going to sew the seam here. So I'm going to take this first piece, put it right sides together on this piece, and I'm going to stitch down this edge. So I'm not going to turn it. I'm going to just carefully take it over to the sewing machine here. Line up the edges. Stitch together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance and leave it there on the machine. Now I'm going to get the next pair here. Again, I'm going to flip that over so they're right sides together, and I'm going to put this one down here. They're exactly the same size, so it's real easy to stitch them together. Again, leave it there. Grab the next pair. And the last pair here. Now I'm going to slide these ones over just a little bit so they don't get bumped while I'm sewing. Now I'm just going to open this up, and the next piece is going to fit right here. So if I just carry this over, put it right sides together, now I can stitch these together. Now along here we're going to be matching that seam right there. It's pretty easy because this seam allowance is going down and the back seam allowance is going up. So they're going in opposite directions. So you can kind of pinch it and you can feel, or you can peel open and see that those match up. Line up the other edge and just stitch down here. And again, leave it on the sewing machine. Now we'll open up the next pair here. Get our next piece. Again, don't turn it or anything, just slide it right over, right sides together, and stitch down. Now I'm going to grab the last one, right sides together here, and then all we have to do is do the same procedure with the very last row here. Open up, add the piece, stitch it on. Now all of the blocks are hanging together with those threads in the middle, and we want to finger press the seam allowances. So we're going to take the top row and press them all to the right. So this one is already kind of facing to the right. So I'm going to kind of pull it open and then just draw my finger or my fingernail right down that seam. Same thing with this whole top row. It's all going to go to the right. Now, the second row we want all going to the left. The reason we are alternating the directions is because this will help us when we stitch our rows together. It will make it so that the seam allowances will nest. So let me show you what I mean. This row here, they're going that way. The bottom row, they're going under. So they're going to kind of nest here. They're going in different directions, and that's going to make it really easy to get these seams lined up. We want these seams lined up. We don't want to stitch it and have it way off like that. Hopefully we will get them exactly lined up, but this will make it a lot easier to get them, if not perfect, at least really, really close. All right, it's all finger pressed and we're ready to stitch our first seam here. So I'm going to put them right sides together, turn it here, match up this top end, and I don't pin it. I just sew a couple of stitches here and that will hold it in place. Then I'm going to put these bottom two corners together and just pull it a little. And most of these seams are going to line up just perfectly. And what I'm doing is stitching down here with a 1/4 inch seam, and I can you can see the seam allowances going in different directions. And you can also press it and you can feel that they're lined up. So this method here, where I'm not pinning it or anything, we call it hope and sew. We sew and we hope they're lined up. And I'll get down to the bottom here and we'll see how close we got. Now I hope they're all perfect. This one is just about perfect. See, everything is lined up there. This one's just about perfect. That one's just about perfect. Now, I don't always have them perfect. This would just happen to be a really good example. If it's not perfect, you can take a few stitches out and adjust it, or you can just say, you know what, it's good enough for me and I'm going to stick with it. So I'm going to finish these other two seams here. All right, so let's see how close we were. All right, right here is one. These are not perfectly lined up. But you know what? That's not going to bother me at all. And I like to be relaxed and have fun when I sew this and not go for absolute perfection. When the whole quilt is done, it's really not going to show that that's not perfectly lined up. And I'd much prefer to have a good time making the blocks and not worry about slight imperfections. Now, this is all we have to make. This is the whole block. I just have to make 16 of these, and then we can lay out the quilt. Now we're ready to lay out the whole quilt, and then we can see that secondary pattern come out. We'll see the hugs and we'll see the kisses. So all we're doing is just turning the blocks in 2 different directions. We get a little more room here. There, now we can see the 2 different blocks. We've got this block, we've got this block, and so if you take one out, you can see that this makes part of that block, part of this block, part of that block. So it's all intertwined there, but the whole effect is just really, really fun. Now, to stitch all the blocks together into a quilt top, we're just going to do it row at a time. So this is the bottom row here. I'm just going to sew these seams, and I'll do that with each row. And then I will sew the rows together with one long seam. Now, sometimes the seam allowances will be nesting, going in opposite directions, but sometimes they will all be going in the same direction. Let's check this one right here. So these ones happen to be nesting, that's fine. You can match up those intersections there. When you come to sewing this long seam, these ones are all going the same direction, so they're all going down, and that's okay. You just match up your intersections and stitch it up. I've got all of the patchwork done here. Now, to finish this quilt up, the steps are going to be the same for this quilt or any quilt that you might make. I'm going to add a border, then I'm going to get a backing and some batting, sandwich everything together, and then do some quilting. You can quilt in the ditch, which is right in these seams here. You can free motion quilt, which is where you move the quilt around and do abstract designs. You can load it onto a big quilting machine like I've got here. And then the edges need to be finished with a binding. So those steps are the same no matter what quilt you make. And instead of trying to squeeze all that into this video, I'm going to do another video explaining all those steps in detail, and that'll be coming out in just a couple of days. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and get this one finished up like we normally do in our videos so you can see what it looks like. I've got the borders on, I've got the quilt on the machine. Now we need to pick out a thread color. Any of these will work. We could go with red, we could go with green. So if we go with the green, it's going to show fairly prominently in those light areas. Gold, that's going to blend nicely there. It's going to blend on the red and on the green. The red, I think it will show up a little too much. It's going to show up too much for me in here. I like the thread color to recede, so I'm going to go with the gold. For the quilting pattern, I get to use a Christmas one. This one has holly leaves and holly berries, but it's fairly simple, not too ornate, and it's a nice overall even pattern that's going to look really good on the quilt. So here's the quilt all finished. Now we can clearly see the two different blocks. We've got this red one, we've got the green one. It's just a nice balanced quilt. It's 64 by 64 inches square. And again, it's the Fab 5 style pattern. So it took 5 fabrics, 4 1-yard pieces for the patchwork. And then that last yard went on the border here. Of course, the binding and backing, those have to be added. And I love to do something on the back, a nice beautiful print that will stand alone and look good with the binding. Now remember, our next video will give you complete detailed steps on how to finish your quilt with your borders, binding, and backing. Thanks for watching our tutorial today on how to make the Hugs and Kisses quilt. We hope you enjoyed it. Now we're gonna have a big giveaway. This is a great big quilt. You may have seen this tutorial. We filmed this. It's called Almost a Lone Star. And it's got a big star in the middle and then parts of stars around the edges. And it's 92 by 92 inches. That will fit on a queen or even a king size bed. It's got a very happy, cheerful, flowery print on the back. It was all made with strips. Now it's very easy to enter the giveaways. All you have to do is find the link right below the video. It's right below the video and it says giveaway. And you put in your email address and your name and we can send this to the winner anywhere in the world. So good luck. Now if you like our tutorials and you want to support us, the best thing you can do is subscribe to our YouTube channel. That would really help us out. Happy quilting!